the advice I give other people is like, you are already good. The question is, what are we going to do with this amazing raw material? What are your gifts and passions, and how are you going to bring that to the world versus trying to latch on to something that you think is somebody else's, because that will make you better.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
Today we have Nealy Fischer on the show. Nealy is known as the flexible chef, but really what we talk about a lot in this episode is being a flexible entrepreneur. And the word flexible can mean a lot of different things to different people, but the key is having entrepreneurship fit into your life versus having your life revolve around being an entrepreneur. In this case, Nealy applies the word flexible in a lot of different ways, one of which is she lives in several different places, not just even in the same country, but multiple countries. So she has to be flexible. She's a mother, she's an author, and really she's just an all-around renegade. Nealy's Why Not Now story is one that resonated big time with me, and I think it will with you too. I will spare the details and let her share, but let me just say we've all had these ideas that we've been thinking about doing, and we think, oh, I can't do that. That's just kind of crazy. Well, she did her thing, and everybody from the outside looking in was like, what? You can't do that. It didn't add up in terms of logic in other people's eyes, but it made perfect sense to her and her family. And she totally rocked it, and it opened doors into really creating a trajectory that would not have existed if she hadn't done this thing. So I can't wait for you to hear her Why Not Now story. This is a wide-ranging conversation. We talk about a lot of things. We also talk about how to create that flexible day, that flexible business, flexible life. And organization, according to Nealy, is the backbone of flexibility. So she talks about what that means and how you can design that as well. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. For me, being able to design my own day is a non-negotiable. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a time management nerd. So when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and more effective, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and I'm a bit obsessed. It's Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized, and I have a new sense of perceived control. My to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. With Monday.com, it's like I have a brand new operating system. There's no long list, and everything has its own home, its own deadline, its own team member that's assigned and associated, and it's color coordinated. We all have multifaceted jobs and businesses. There are many components to my business, and each and every one of them has its own compartment. Each division is always one click away. For example, my team and I have a dedicated board for this very podcast. Did you know there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast to air? It's the same exact process every time. And it's a system. We have the various key steps mapped out as micro tasks. And this allows for my team and I to stay in lockstep every step of the way. With Monday.com, I can zoom out and see the big picture, a roadmap view from 30,000 feet. And a moment later, I can zoom in and focus on a specific micro task within a project, within a division of the company. I could go on and on about the features that Monday.com offers, one of which is I've built my social media content calendar inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, that I like, and it's embedded into my overall Google Calendar. Another feature that I love is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to Monday.com if you want a free trial. And let me know on social media how it goes for you. Shoot me a DM. We can swap tips and tricks. Nealy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today. And let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now?
Absolutely. I've been thinking about this question, and I want to preface by saying that the first thing that came to mind was literally every single morning I wake up, like, we want to hit our snooze button. It's like, well, why not wake up and do the run or do the, like, I feel like the why not now question has been so much a part of my every single day. And so when I was thinking about a defining moment that could motivate you guys, I was thinking back really about the moment that actually kickstarted both my career, and I would even say the moment that I became an adult, which sometimes happens when you're already an adult, right? Mm-hmm. And about 16 years ago, we had just moved to Hong Kong. I had a 3-year-old at home, and he was probably about 8 months old. I was, a typical expat in a new world, and we were living in a small apartment, and I was kind of relearning what it meant to be a mother with all those challenges in a new city with no friends. And I just started taking up yoga a couple months prior. Probably, I guess I'd been practicing for about 6 months, and it was a passion of mine. I had already been a teacher in the fitness space and really quickly realized that this was something that I wanted to do with my life. But I was probably still nursing at the time or something. And I was leaking through my tank tops and all that stuff and kind of running home, doing laundry and doing all the things that we do as new moms. And I remember my husband and I were out at a restaurant. I had just met a friend who said she was going to India to do yoga teacher training. And I was like, so my husband and I were having a glass of wine on this rooftop of Life Cafe, I remember. And he's like, why don't you do that? And I was like, what, me now? What are you talking about? We just moved to Asia. I have a newborn baby. What, me go to India and live in a tent for 3 months. And he's like, yeah, he literally, he maybe even said, why not now? And I was like, oh my God. I was probably, I was probably 20, whatever. I was in my mid 20s. And it's almost like that was my first moment where the person that I loved gave me permission. And I think the next morning I had already looked into teacher trainings, booked my ticket, and subsequently lived in a tent in India for 6 weeks, left my baby behind. My sister came to visit. It was actually kind of simple. And I don't think he's traumatized, but the little baby didn't even remember that I left him. And it kickstarted my everything, really, my teaching yoga for the last 16 years. It kickstarted all the things that I've done ever since, my Flexible Chef brand that was really built on the foundation of my yoga practice. And that was my moment.
Oh my goodness. And it's amazing. So it happened very quickly, it sounds like, but the big factor seemed to be your husband just
giving you that nudge of, well, is almost his idea, right? It sounds like.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I think that there were, I was voicing this kind of inner desire. And I think that sometimes we have these like little bubbling ideas inside of us. There's so many things that hold us back, right? Like the mom guilt, or like you think that it's just not possible, right? And even like societal sort of judgment, like, well, what do you think you're doing? Like you have this responsibility, and it's not responsible for you to leave your family or whatever. I mean, at least at the time it was the vibe in the environment. But yeah, I mean, and ever since there's been so many moments where I've taken action in that way. But yeah, it was interesting that my partner was the one that inspired that.
Oh, it's lovely. First of all, that's an amazing partner to have. And that's where my mind went too, is good for you for navigating all of the why nots. There were probably a million reasons you could have listed of why not. Mm-hmm. And you still did it. And one of the biggest ones, it seems like, is usually on the top of our list is, what are other people going to think about me leaving my baby? Is probably one of the first ones, but you did it and you figured it out. So logistically, you had your sister come, and did it end up being fairly seamless? It sounds
totally
like
seamless.
It was
totally seamless. I mean, outside of me living in a tent thing, which was a whole other story, and getting sick and like basically losing all my body weight, and having to do part of the course from my bedroom / toilet, but that's a whole other story.
But that wasn't had nothing to do with the logistics right at home.
Exactly.
I think it's Tim Ferriss who says, and it actually is, he constantly says, what would it look like if this were easy? And you basically played that out in terms of, making it happen. So it was quick. Was it a take action type of situation where you barely thought about it, reached out to your sister, lined it up, and greenlit it?
Basically. And, because it was a little bubbling dream of mine inside, I had already kind of known who I might study with if I would have gone or whatever. And so, yeah, everything was relatively seamless. And I'm the kind of person that when I make a decision, I'm like, okay, action points, like boom, 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 boom. And, finding resources and figuring out, like outside of all of the challenges, how we're going to find a way and make something work. And that was really my first step in doing that.
I love it. This is so good for anyone that's listening who has had something bubbling and kind of premeditated. Sounds like you knew where you'd go, what you would do, but finally took action. And how did you overcome, or was it even a question of, oh my gosh, what are other people going to think? Because that's oftentimes one of the biggest things that holds us back.
I think that once I made the decision, which I think I probably even made over that glass of wine that night, there was none of that. And I don't even think since then I've paid, well, there have been a couple other why not now moments where I've maybe thought about that, like when I started my blog or when I put myself out there, when I went on TV, like what are other people going to think or whatever. There was like mini moments like that. But I basically don't think about that anymore. At least I consciously don't. Whatever's happening unconsciously is whatever. But I pretty much don't think about what anyone thinks really anymore, because it's pretty futile, as you and I both know.
Right, exactly. It definitely holds some people back. And it sounds like this may not have been a factor, but I was thinking about it in terms of timing. Social media wasn't a big thing then, was it? Do you think that would have played a role at all?
So interesting. Wow. And right. And I didn't have to be on this weird pressure to document what I was doing or.
Right. What freedom, right?
Right. Gosh, did I have a cell phone there? I probably did, but I don't even remember it, which is so interesting. It was a different world back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't have as many outside opinions headed our way. They weren't as accessible, I guess. So it's interesting. I guess, in a way, there are pros and cons to everything, but it's just interesting how, the judgment factor is more amplified now in some cases.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And then, carry on, and that really greenlit your entire career, as you said, and you became an adult. I'm using air quotes here. And fast forward, and you've navigated, a lifestyle. What I think is fascinating is you bounce between 3 different continents, right?
Mm-hmm. Usually, yes.
Usually,
when
right?
There's flights, yes.
Exactly, which is a whole nother topic. But how does that, I'm a big fan of map freedom. I've had a career that has really fortunately allowed me to kind of be wherever I want to be and need to be in terms of, what's feeling good as far as geographics go. But in your case, can you tell us a little bit about that, how and why, and how you've navigated just being able to juggle not only a family and children and a career, but 3 different continents?
Yeah. So my husband runs a business in Hong Kong. So we lived there for 16 years. And still, well, when the skies open up again, we'll be back. We've always traveled, and I've always been similarly, don't see borders as limitations. And thankfully, we have the opportunity to do that, right? I realize not everyone has this amazing opportunity, so I'm incredibly blessed. But I think that, we're living in a world where anything is possible. And it's easy to think about the challenges of it, right? Like, oh my gosh, like the time zones, like sometimes I'll do, podcast interviews at 4:00 in the morning or random hours of stuff. The other day I recorded something. I did an Instagram takeover at 5 a.m. Like, there are a million challenges, particularly I have 4 kids. And so, oftentimes things are not with like time, hours don't work out. And of course, leaving them when I go do my work in the US or whatever. But I think it's far more interesting to think about the opportunity versus the challenge. And, every place offers its own expertise. For example, I found the best people in the world, and my team is in the US, and we worked with people from everywhere. And I just think there's just opportunity to figure out where the best of the best exists, where the opportunity lies. And these days, and we're all experiencing this right now, most things anyways happen from your chair and your laptop, or at least many of the productive things can happen in that way. And it's really just about working flexibly, pun intended. I'm the flexible chef, and, and being creative and hyper disciplined, I think, is right. It's about managing your schedule and figuring it out. Let's see what my kids say in 10 years. If they're like, Mom was never home, but it's from a parenting standpoint, I think that when I'm home, I'm uber home, right? I'm extra home, and I'm overly available, and I'm doing pickups and drop-offs and pajamas, walking the dog, and doing all the things that I couldn't do if my job was a 9-to-5 somewhere in my city. So there are benefits to being able to work remotely and kind of manage, schedules, et cetera.
I was just thinking the same thing as far as the flexible entrepreneur. That's you. Yet the discipline has to be there too. So it might sound, like a juxtaposition of having the two, but I completely hear you in the self-motivation and just being able to navigate your own day and manage your day. So those of you listening, it's not just this fluid fairy tale type of life necessarily. It takes a lot of discipline if you are constantly in that flexible state, whether it's geographically or just even from a kind of a mentality standpoint. So let's talk a little bit about I was reading on your site, of course, and doing some research, and you talked about going on your first diet, I think at age 11. And I was around the same age when I went on my first diet, and you tried all the fad diets. And here you are now, the flexible chef. And you ended up making food such a, it's the cornerstone of your brand. Was the process when you were in your mid-20s and you went to do the yoga teacher training, had you really healed a lot from the diet culture and that phase of your life, or was that in the works?
It's funny. That question is interesting. I've talked about this a lot, but that specific question is very interesting. When did the healing happen? I think for a lot of, I was going to say women, but not necessarily just women. I think for a lot of us, the process is really gradual. I even think that the healthiest process should be gradual, because when you're dealing with, I would even call it a disorder, right? When you have a disordered relationship with food and it lasts that long. For me, it lasted at least until I was, let's say, 20, right? That's a lot of years. I think it should be gradual, sort of like how a diet should be. You don't just eat kale for a month and now you're skinny and healthy. Like, it doesn't work that way. You need to actually have, healthy daily habits over a period of time, integrate new healthy patterns into your daily life that stick so that they can work. The commitment to it can happen overnight, but the actual really owning it and transforming your inner landscape is a process, and it should be a process, in my opinion. So I would say that even I got married when I was young. I was 21 when we got married. We've been married for, now I'm going to tell you how old I am, but we've been married for 21 years. And,
congratulations.
I think I remember when we were living in the Upper West Side, I used to get bagels and scoop them. Do you remember those days of a scooped bagel with tuna? And I scooped it because I thought I was going to eat less calories. And,
oh yeah, you mean scooping all the bread out of the middle?
Scoop the bread out.
Oh
exactly.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yep.
So I would say that the part of why this yoga teaching journey to India was such a defining moment is because I think the path of yoga led me into a much healthier relationship with my body. So I would say probably around that time is when I came to terms with healing and with a healthier approach. And once I started teaching, and as if those of you listening who are in a teaching capacity, and by the way, you don't just have to be in a classroom with a board behind you to be a teacher. Like, if you're a parent, you're a teacher. If you're a good friend, you're a teacher. Like, if you're in a position of inspiring other people, you are a teacher. And so you just got to own that, And I think when I started teaching yoga is when I really realized that in order to really authentically inspire the people I was teaching, I needed to be authentic with myself. And that comes through, obviously, if you're not. And so that was probably my kind of full circle healing when that happened.
It's such a good point about it being a process and gradual. And I think what you said, the commitment might be overnight, but the process and the carrying out and the execution is definitely layered and gradual. I know it has been in my case as well. And what's one lesson that you find yourself learning over and over, Nealy?
I think especially now with the stuff that we're going through is to not be so hard on myself. I don't know if that's even such a lesson, but that's what I constantly come back to, because for us overachievers, and especially in the world we live in now, where it's the constant, what's the next thing and how do I up the game? And all of that stuff is not being so hard on myself, because the ease will allow for stuff to actually happen better than trying to force it, stay up all night, thinking about it, and being just really listening to intuition more than what my head tells me what I ought to be doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. I mean, it's a lifelong journey for me to kind of learn
right.
when to let things happen versus make them. And I think that's what you're saying. So when you talk about intuition, how do you listen? Do you have any tips or, tricks on how you can really tune in and hear that voice? Or is it a voice?
I do. When our lives are super busy and we're running from thing to thing, idea to idea, appointment to appointment, meal to meal, problem to problem, we're too caught up. And even if it's, by the way, project to project, like the things that you set out to do, right? When the busy takes over our brains, we don't have any quiet space to listen. And so I'm a massive believer in creating healthy practices, daily habits, whatever that is for you. So for me, particularly now, because everyone's home, and if I don't carve out quiet space in my day, it just kind of, the day takes over me, the kids take over, whatever, the phones or everything that happens. And so I have a daily yoga practice that I do. And sometimes it's what I call flexible yoga practice. And it's like my little 20-minute morning thing. Sometimes I'll play an inspiring song or something. I go on daily walks pretty much almost every day, and I'll either listen to a podcast or some idea that inspires me, or really just music or something to get my body moving. getting ourselves out of like kind of stale energy and into more of a state of flow where we're actually physically moving is my personal way of doing that. I had a regular meditation practice for a lot of years. I studied with a meditation teacher. That was another one of my why not now moments. I was following this teacher and I wanted to study with him, but I was living in Hong Kong and the retreats were in Sedona, Arizona, out of all places. And I was like dreaming it for like, I don't know, 6 months or something. And I just overnight literally signed up and did that. Flew to Sedona 3 times that year. It was another crazy story for another time. But so meditation was, the personal mantra thing was, so I got a personal mantra and I'm not back, we say like, do you meditate? It's like, yes, of course I meditate. Actually, these days I'm a little out of my meditation practice, to be totally honest, but I did get this mantra. And so I use that every once in a while. It helps kind of ground me. I actually use it in the middle of the night when I'm dreaming up ideas and I can't sleep. I have a whole like mantra practice in the middle of the night, also for another conversation. Yeah.
Is it TM? I feel the same in terms of my meditation practice. I don't feel like it's been very solid lately. And I learned transcendental meditation, went and got, studied on that front. And I do the same thing with my mantra in terms of just kind of it's an anchor. Even if I'm not in the middle of a meditation, I can kind of like come back to it. But do you find like with the travel, I know you're not traveling necessarily right now, and having kids, are they always going with you, first of all?
No, I mean, I have a son in college, first of all.
Okay.
So I go visit him. So no, and my youngest is 7 already. So when they were younger, sure, not always. And I like it that way because when I'm away, I'm like working 24/7, super full on. And then, like I said, when I'm home, I'm momming 24/7, super full on. And it works really well that way. And distance, I think, does make the heart grow fonder. I get the best hugs and kisses when I come back after a trip.
That's awesome. It's very true. It's very true. But even walking can be a form of meditation, I feel,
God, totally.
In terms of, I loved what you said about kind of getting out of that stale energy and into something in more of a state of flow, and being able to know and be aware of when you're in it. I think sometimes that's like the golden ticket. So when you look back at, even if you can choose whatever age this may be, but what advice would you give to your younger self, whether it's the 25-year-old getting ready to go or mid-20s to your yoga teacher training, or it's younger? What would you tell her?
I would tell her that she is good enough. My default was always that I'm not good enough and therefore I need to fix myself. Whether it was the diet when I was 11, I'm too fat, I need to get skinny to fix myself and then I'll be okay. And, like a lot of us, again, of us overachievers who, and I call myself a recovering perfectionist, but like, the little bits inside that are perfectionists tell us that the starting point is not good. The advice I give other people is like, you are already good. The question is, what are we going to do with this amazing raw material? What are your gifts and passions, and how are you going to bring that to the world versus trying to latch on to something that you think is somebody else's, because that will make you better.
That's so good. That's what I tell my younger self too. I wrote her a letter once and the first thing was, you are enough. It's simple, yet it's huge. It's so huge. So you're known as the flexible chef. Right now we're in the middle of a pandemic and people don't have a ton at home in their cupboards, or they're just kind of making do. What are some of your favorite substitutes, or have you done anything recently where you're like, geez, I just made this one up and I'm known for this and it's kind of out there?
Yeah. So a lot of us are kind of figuring out, first of all, things are changing probably by the time everyone's listening, things will have changed like tomorrow. But, there was a while where we were trying not to even leave the house to get fresh stuff. So you were kind of stocking up. And I think, by the way, I've spoken to friends across the world. I'm in Israel right now. I've spoken to friends in Asia and in the US and in the UK. And like basically everyone's in the same boat, which is extraordinary. And everyone's dealing with the same stuff, right? Trying to avoid not going out too much. And so trying to figure out, what do I use in my cupboard? How do I use up the 70,000 cans that I bought in panic mode a couple months ago? How do we make really simple things? Because, we're all spending far too much time in the kitchen. On the one hand, it's amazing because, right, we're having family dinners like never before. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of dishes and cleanup and way too much food. And so we're constantly thinking like, how do I minimize? So my favorite latest thing is I have a slow cooker. And I was like basically making breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 17 snacks along the way. And I did not want to be in the kitchen all day. So now the kids make their own breakfast. I leave stuff out and everyone can help themselves. And I basically make lunch and dinner at the same time. So I'm only in the kitchen making a mess once. And my new favorite thing is my slow cooker that I pulled out from the dust. And I make a slow cooker thing for dinner, not every single night, but like pretty often actually. The other day, I made a chickpea curry with canned chickpeas and spices and threw in some cauliflower and kale and coconut milk. And it really tasted like from scratch curry that was cooking up all day. I made a bolognese in the crock pot the other day, some leftover veggie soup stuff. Like I'm just having a ball with the slow cooker and dinner is ready. And then I just have to wipe the thing and it's ready for the next day. But I've been pulling out the canned tunas and making, tuna pancakes, and I've got a ton of frozen stuff. We bought a ton of I've got frozen cauliflower rice, so we're making fried rice with frozen cauliflower. Yeah. And I'm actually trying to keep things really simple. We're eating clean. We're indulging every once in a while, but we're not going crazy.
Such a good point about the slow cooker too. And I love that you do it in one swoop. You're in and out of the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And it's not this constant string along throughout the day. That's so good too.
I'm also figuring out, I make a menu at the beginning of the week. We kind of started with talking about how you have to be uber organized when you're working from home. Well, you also have to be really organized if you want to wing something later with dinner time. You really have to have a plan and stuff in the freezer. So I'll cook and freeze stuff ahead of time. So I have stocks and, extras ready in the freezer so I could just pop something out, right? So you don't have to be fussing.
It's amazing. And it's like a takeaway from this conversation, I think, is that flexible, but there's still some discipline. There's still planning. And it's like you're setting yourself up to be flexible. There's a lot of structure around it.
I would even go further and say that the backbone of flexibility is organization. You have to have a structure. You have to have a plan in order to wing anything. I mean, if you think about the body, even part of this idea came from when I was practicing yoga. Flexibility in your body doesn't come just from being loosey-goosey in a pose and trying to stretch it out. You actually have to use your muscles and some sensible alignment, some understanding physiology to get your body in a particular place in order for it to stretch. It's just really the same thing in almost everything we do. You need to be able to have organization in the kitchen in order to whip up a flexible meal at night. You need to have a plan. You need to have a schedule if you want to get through your day and be able to be oh, actually, let me change this up a little bit. No, you could only change it up a little bit if you even know what you started with.
Such a good point. Organization. The backbone of flexibility is organization. That's so good. And it's such a good note to wrap up with. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining us and across, you're literally on the other side of the world. And I appreciate your time and wisdom. And we'll be definitely following along and learning tips and tricks along the way. And just thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?